Welcome to our in-depth mindset question for today. We have our question on, are you stuck with the same problem? So let's face it, sometimes we have a problem that we can't seem to resolve. I reflect on this because in 14 years of coaching, I have had clients that have come with almost like on repeat. One of them particularly they thought that they might go to jail, or that were thinking they would go to jail. And so this was on repeat inside of their mind for a long time. And it took working at it from different angles to be able to resolve it. Another one with the financial struggle, and each week, each month, each year showing up with the same financial challenge and struggle, even though they were doing work on it, still not being able to fully shift it. Another comes to mind when it was the same problem and getting stuck in that same problem with their relationship with food. And so maybe we've experienced that ourselves as coaches, that we find ourselves being stuck with the same problem. It's like you feel yourself on that record repeating over and over again. And we were like, how do I break through this? So if you are currently watching this session, and just hashtag live, if you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. So what we want to be able to do in this session, I'm going to give you some ideas and why we get stuck with that pesky problem that we can't seem to resolve. What are some of the reasons why that is, and what can we do about it? So first of all, what we want to do is, the reason this topic became such a one that we wanted to provide value for you is because we had one of our members in Maximum Growth come through our email and said to one of the team members, hey, I've got this problem, and gave them a long list of what had been happening, and can you help? And I happened to be the one that received the email because of that particular day. And then I responded. And so we had a little conversation in our before chat, and they had said, I'm just sick of hearing the same problem. And I'm like, no, like I'm a coach, and that's what we're here to do as coaches, is we help people to go on this self-discovery and problem-solving journey. And so if I haven't been able to help and solve a problem, it's then getting me to really stretch out and think more about how to go, because as soon as we solve the problem, it's like, oh, there we go. I've got now another template, another layer that I can help someone else with. So I definitely have a big heart to want to solve problems, and maybe you do too. So welcome to this class. So what I want you to imagine is there are many layers of a problem. I think where we can sometimes get a little bit stuck, or not necessarily stuck, but sometimes we can get a little bit too over-eager to solve a problem with the Demartini method, because sometimes it is an oversimplification how to solve a problem, because it's like the tool for 1,000 uses. So of course it will solve the problem, but that doesn't say what is the actual problem itself, and how complex is that problem, and how many times do you have to hit the problem in multiple different angles in order to solve that problem, which means maybe using the Demartini method 1,000 times to hit and really solve the bigger dynamic of problem. And so how I describe when someone comes in with their stuff, I call it like a ball of mess. So just imagine we've got a ball of mess, all messy and stuff in here, and it's like, okay, great, hand me your ball of mess. And they say it all. You've probably experienced it as a coach, where people just go, they tell you more and more and more. And it's like, okay, tell me more. Like, I'm really big on, especially in our Maximum Growth classes, I'm big on retrieving that content, because that's really important to get a really beautiful painted picture about what's really going on. So when they give you this ball of mess and you take all of that in, what you're essentially wanting to do, and I've got like a process on how to go about doing this, which I share in my coaches level membership. But this ball of mess is, we start as coaches, just imagine like pulling each string out. We start to pull a little string here and there. And then over the time, there gets to a point as we follow the process and we start asking questions that the ball of mess is not so tight anymore, but we start to loosen it. And once we start to loosen it, there is a point in your sessions that when you're working with a client, that all of a sudden it's like unravels, and you finally have some breathing room inside of the work, and you start to see, oh, now I see the actual problem, because it's been hiding inside there of why it's all so tangled. but you just haven't been able to see it from the very beginning. So you hit it and you pull a little strings until eventually that one comes out. And so what we want to do is find that core. Well, there might be multiple cores, so I wouldn't want to say that's just one, but there's a core problem or core challenge that they're faced with, that once we find that and we work on that, then a lot more can unravel for them. So we want to have this really a curiosity to solve problems as a coach. And also with ourselves as well, because at the moment we go, it's too hard. I get frustrated with myself because I'm still in that same cycle of trying to solve the same problem. Or you do that and you project that onto your clients. Like, why haven't you gotten over this? Like, slap, slap, slap. It's just because we haven't found the deeper rooted problem that will help to shift things. And so if we look at human behavior, we have innate behavior and we have learned behavior. So in a simple sense, so innate behavior is crying, for example. Maybe you hurt your knee and then all of a sudden you cry because it's innate behavior inside of you. Or innate behavior is you feel signs and symptoms that you're hungry and you go and eat. So there's innate behavior, and then there's also learned behavior, which comes through our observation and also an element of reinforcement. And so if you imagine from, I don't know how old you are, but whatever age you're born, and then all the days, weeks, months, years upon years upon years, decade upon decade, and we keep on going until today, that's a lot of learned behavior and learned experience that has been ingrained in your brain every single day. And so then when you come with a problem, and a problem that you get stuck in, we have the complexity of the problem itself. There is multifaceted. I've been writing some beautiful blogs on this, which is also inside of our mindset education for our members, which is this complexity and multifaceted problem, that we wanted to untangle that and find out what are the main complexities that are impacting that particular problem. It's also the depth of the problem. Every challenge that we have, it's not just a surface level, but it's how deep does it go? Does this go back to your early childhood? Does it go back to yesterday? Because the depth of it will play a role and a part in us being able to resolve it. Clearly, the deeper the depth, the deeper the charge, the more we're going to have to work at it. And then we also have patterns of behavior or patterns of emotional charge that surround the problem. And so we also have to work at that. So a great example of that is finances. Come with, I want to fix my finances. Okay, great. Well, there's patterns around what do you do with your money? How do you serve people? What do you do to attract money? What are the patterns you have around shame and guilt? And so there's all these kind of extra patterns around the outside that we're working on in order to solve the problem of finances. So there's the patterns we're looking for around the problem that make a difference. Then we have this internal dynamic. So we have an internal resistance. Sometimes you're just like, I'm not quite ready, where there's like fear, uncertainty. There's a strong attachment to maybe staying in the existing way, which some people have. It's that comfort of my problem is actually really comfortable, but it's painful, but it's the pain of actually maybe going and doing the work, and then the pain of the unknown becomes too great. So then you're like, I just want to stay. And the resistance to doing the problem is something that we have to look at and work on. And then because we want to shift you to readiness, we have to go to resistance to readiness. If that's really what it is, we want to change the pace of what you want. You want to change the pace of change, which means that you want to embrace changing, because you're not changing. Your rate of change with resistance is like really minuscule, and it's like slow, super slow. And so in order for us to kind of unstick a problem, we have to have the readiness to want to change. And this is not just I want to change, but I'm not doing anything. It's actually getting you ready to reach a point where you're prepared, you're ready to do the actions, you're willing to do the pain, because it's pain staying where you are, there's going to pain doing the work, so that we get you ready to go and do the work. And then we also have external circumstances which affect our ability to unstuck ourselves. Is that a word? Unstick ourselves from a problem and having the same problem. And one is circumstances. One of the things that I found, especially with the work and learning universal principles, you have this newfound idea how the world and the universe works. And you do now realize that in everything, God is in everything, that there's a God moment, which means that there's not good or bad, right or wrong, positive and negative in everything that is experienced within the world and within you. And so for someone then, and you've had experiences, little glimpses of this, where it brings your, heart open, tears, you feel like a humbleness to this life experience. And then the circumstances around, people are still living in morality, still in judgment, still right and wrong, and separation. And so then all of a sudden you learn this profound new and have this new awakening to what life is. And then you go back into where everyone is judging morality and you're like, whoa, what just happened? So the circumstances, in order for you to shift and change, sometimes it's really difficult to go and shift and change when you keep on being stuck in that same dynamic that influences you somewhat, because you get more influenced by that. So there are ways that we do in maximum growth classes that help to kind of shift that dynamic and have more love and appreciation for it. But what I'm trying to explain is why we get stuck in that problem is because we keep on putting ourselves, it's like you're trying to lose weight, but you keep on going and eating at McDonald's. So you sit down and you eat your food at McDonald's. And so it's like you're trying to, and you maybe you're eating a salad, but you're surrounded by food that isn't so, it's heavily processed and isn't so healthy for you. And so then you're trying to eat your food, but you're in this environment of like, it's just not possible, or it's much harder, maybe not possible, but harder. And so then it becomes harder for you to unstick yourself from the problem because of your external circumstances, which is why we created maximum growth classes each and every week, and especially our community co-working space, is so that you can start surrounding yourself with people who are having the same thinking as you and having the same awareness as you, because some of that's going to stick onto you and you'll get it more integrated into your own thinking, and so that becomes more of a baseline, and then you can shift and change the circumstances as well. So the other is that we want to change. We want to be open to change, and we want to be open to behavioral change, because what we do with the Demartini method is perception, but we have to follow through with the behavior. It's perceptions, decisions, and actions, or it's perceptions and behavior. We have to start shifting our doing, what we actually do with our body and our work and our life and our finances. We have to do something, which means that if we're going to unstick it, we want to notice that we're actually making those behavioral changes, because if they were created, our behavioral change was created because it was observed and reinforced. There also has to be an element of creating new behaviors that are also reinforced over and over again, which is part of the reason why the Demartini method asks us to ask the question over and over again to reinforce or create new neural pathways. But we still want the doing aspect of it. It's not just all thinking in your mind and doing it, the shifting up here. Let's take action with it too. So hopefully you're finding this interesting. If you've got some comments, some questions, feel free to leave it below. So then when it comes to how do we go about actually unsticking ourselves from the same problem that we kept having going on over and over again, and that is we want to expand our thinking, and we want to expand and create space for solutions. So I love that Einstein's quote, which is like, you can never solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. It's like, whoa, you can never solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it, which is what I love about the Demartini method and the questions and coming to do class, because we have class with the application of the Demartini method each and every week for the entire year. And so that gives you a solid repetition, ingraining and into your mind and thinking. And so then it changes the layout of or the framework of your thinking. So then when you get a problem, you then layer it upon that new level of thinking rather than the old, say, morality level of thinking. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to work out ways of how can we solve the problem with a bigger picture dynamic. Interesting, in the class that we had, our session 1 class for mindset yesterday, well, one of our members was talking about a problem that she was having with her dad and her brother. And she's like, what do I have to do to resolve this and the resentment that I have? And she tells me the things that she's working on. I said, okay, great. There's a ball of mess. So here it is. And I was like, okay. So my initial was like, okay, let's go out to the expanded. One of the things that we're really big on talking about here in Maximum Growth is like that dynamic, because the dynamic is at play and playing into the reason why we have resentment. So if we want to solve problems and we have an infatuation with solving problems, we're going to attract someone into our life, which is this dynamic for this individual, where they just didn't want to solve any problems and they were actually, in her perception, creating more problems. I was like, okay, so no matter how much you work on this dynamic here and her sibling and also her dad, and working on that dynamic, her infatuation is breeding it. So we started to expand the thinking around the problem. Let's work on you. Then I gave her another layer of expanding the problem. So it's not just her dynamic and how she shows up and how that's impacting the problem. Then I started to say, well, what happens if, because we want to move from our individualistic constraints to the broader constraints of humanity. So if we focus on the individual constraint of a problem that we have in our personal life, but we don't expand and get a bigger problem, then we're going to be stuck at this level of problems. So it's like, how can you have a bigger problem that you now go and focus on, and that be your inspiration? That's what you have your mental real estate state in, and that's what you're focused on. Go focus on that problem, and then see what happens to the family dynamic. Maybe that starts to make more sense. Maybe that is a distraction, and you just go focus on what you're most inspired by. And so we just found a bigger problem to handle, and bigger problem to work on, because let's face it, you are going to have problems no matter what level. As a baby, you have problems. When you're dying, you have problems, and everything in between, there's problems. And so it's like, what problem do you want? Like, what problem do you want to work on that's going to be inspiring, connected, interesting, that you want to put your energy, time, dedication into? Like, what is that problem? So expanding your thinking is one. And then also, there are sometimes we can have a tendency to be more problem focused versus solution orientated. So there has to come a point where if we get stuck in the problem, we have to start to switch our mental thinking in, okay, what's the solution? What's the solution? What's the solution? Because if not, it's never going to take us out of that problem. We're going to keep on getting stuck in the same problem. So we want to think about, how do we shift and how do we awaken the solution orientation around the problem, and be focused on that. So if you find yourself stuck in a problem and you're on this same repeat, or your client is, here's what I suggest to do. One is take their full ball of mess, get them to download everything or write everything down on a piece of paper. If it's for you, write down everything. Then we want to kind of start to unpack what's really going on. See if you can find, well, we talk about sometimes in the problem underneath the problem, and see if you can find what's really driving all of this. Like, what's the driver of this? What's the bigger thing? Think about expanding out your awareness and the ability to solve the problem. Don't stay so granular, because someone comes to you with a problem, it's often not the problem. It's like what they think is the problem, but there's something else going on. So just be aware, like, try and find what that is. Is it greater? Is it underneath? So just see if you can find that. Once you do, then start going solution focus. Like, what do you have to do to be solution? Like, how do I, and have like, I'm going to solve this problem by the end of the year. I've got this many days. I'm going to have an intention to solve the problem, and then be focused on solution focused, solving the problem rather than being stuck in the problem. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you'd love the workbook that is attached to this, all you have to do is in the chat, just comment workbook. We'll share the workbook with you. If you are watching the replay and it's up in Maximum Growth Academy, then you'll be able to download it just underneath here.